All right. So a very warm welcome to all the ISPIC 2021 Phase 3 candidates. As you all know, viewers, we have almost 150 candidates in Phase 3, which is the third phase of the India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge, particularly about inspiration webinar series, where a lot of group mentoring with experts, people from industry, people from academia, people from within the smart protein ecosystem in India and outside of India as well. We've been hosting speakers who are talking about different thematic areas which are crucial for new product development, for starting a venture, for doing research in the smart protein or the alternative protein domain. Today's webinar in this ISPIC 2021 is the 17th one in phase 3, which is about consumer insights, market research, market potential for the Indian smart protein sector, right? And we have our two expert speakers from the GFI India team. We have Rajyalakshmi ji, who's our consultant and market insights expert, and we have Husain Kurawadwala, who's our research associate at GFI India. Both of them have been working for past few months and years on basically focusing on consumer insights, market potential, understanding these specifics. As we all know, this data is relatively missing for Indian market. Given that India in general is a data dark economy and country, but also the fact that smart protein sector, which comes under the food processing sector largely, is also quite new for our country, given that we don't process as much food. The retail distribution and other channels of distribution do not record a lot of data. So understanding who your target market is, who your target consumer is, and you all might have seen some of our resources where we talk about India being a vegetarian country and busting that myth versus India as a non-vegetarian consumer cohort, majority of them. So we'll understand a lot of nuances about these topics today. And before we get started with the session, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors, Capri Global, NICE, and Alchem Foundation, and our organizing partner CIECO, along with our supporting partners from academia, from industrial research institutes, and also our smart protein ecosystem partners, consisting a lot of incubators, accelerators, VC firms, and sector builders who are all supporting the challenge so that post-challenge, a lot of our innovators, entrepreneurs can find the support that they need. Just wanted to quickly update all of you that the Smart Protein Solutions Wall from 2021 ISPIC Challenge, so that we can showcase the ideas of all our participants. We started out with almost 750 people, out of which almost 350 people were eligible for phase 2. So we are requesting everyone to submit their ideas and their entries for the Smart Protein Solution Wall. We have already started seeing some entries come in, as you can see on my screen. We really hope you take that we can connect you with investors, other entrepreneurs, like-minded co-founders, help you hire talent, and in general help you network better within the community. So submit this as soon as you can. The deadline for this is 15th of January. So just in a couple of days, we'll be closing down the form for this. So please prioritize this with your primary member of your team. At the same time, today we are here for the session on consumer insights and market research. We have a few more sessions coming in. Tomorrow's session, Elena from Brink might not be able to join us. We'll still have a couple of speakers and we'll get started around 7 p.m. as well. So please make sure that you join in. It will be a crucial session. And then we have the SciTech office, as you all know, with a lot of our experts within the smart protein ecosystem and academic ecosystem in India, with a SciTech background in plant-based meat, eggs, dairy. So make sure you submit the Google form. I have not seen many questions come in. Can I get a quick show of hands of who all have not yet submitted the question? If you have not submitted the question, please raise your hand. All right. So as you can see, a lot of people have not submitted the questions yet. So make sure that you submit your questions to the speakers in advance, depending on the topic and the RFP that you're kind of problem statement that you're kind of working on as part of the challenge. This will be your only opportunity to interact with SciTech experts for office hours in a breakout room format like we did last time, right? So you'll go into each of their rooms and talk. And for all other sessions, we have sent you the registration links on Zoom in advance. Make sure you submit your questions before the session so that we can relay those back to the expert speakers as well. Having said that, let me pass on to Rajyalakshmi to switch on her slide deck and get started with the session today. Thank you for joining us, Husain and Raji. We can see your screen. Perfect.
Thank you, Shardal. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm Raji, and as Shardal mentioned, I'm working with GFI India, handling the consumer and market insights for the past 1 year. So prior to this, I have experience in consumer insights and marketing strategy with multiple firms like McDonald's, Unilever, and Aditya Birla Retail. So today's session, I have with me Husain, who's a research associate at GFI India. And both of us would be taking you through all the work that we've done in the last couple of years. So right from identifying who's going to be the early adopter for this sector, and then how are we going to reach these consumers in terms of what are the products that we can create, or how do we market them, how do we position them. So different aspects of the GTM we'll be running you through. So we can start. So Hussein, so I'll just start with the agenda and then hand over to you for the first couple of, for the first section. Yeah. So today we'll be covering briefly the Indian and global smart protein landscape, where we'll cover the happenings that are in the global, totally at a global level, and also some of the recent launches and developments in the APAC and the Indian market. Post that, we'll be taking you in detail through a lot of insights that we have got through various consumer work that we have done in the last 2 years, which is right from who's identifying the early adopters of plant-based meat to what is going to be the drivers of consumption for alternate protein segment in India, and what are the kinds of products that we can look at and how are we going to market and position them. And in the last, we will be looking at the market potential in India, where we'll be covering briefly what is going to be the potential for the domestic consumption and also the export potential. So I'll quickly hand over to Husain to run you through the first section, which is Indian and global smart protein landscape.
Thanks, Raji. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to present today. So, as you know, we've been doing consumer insights work for the past 2 years, and in fact, our first, specific ISPIC-related webinar was done in 2020, and you can definitely take a look at that. It's on our YouTube website. There are some good insights in that video as well. And ever since 2020, there's of course a completely different landscape today. We're just in 2022, but especially in the last 6 months, the plant-based meat market in India has exploded. So Raji, can you put on the next slide? So basically, there have been multiple launches across plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, bringing the total number of products in the market to 50 plus. Although many of these brands are available in tier 1 cities, we are already seeing some products trickling into tier 2 and beyond. And launches have happened across all channels, whether it is retail, food service, D2C, or e-commerce. And we want to definitely note that many of these launches are not just B2C, like consumer brands like Imagine Meats, but also B2B launches. For example, Be Veg Foods, one of the companies we closely work with, have launched their products with Haldirams in Haldirams restaurants, as well as there's the Green Meat Pounder, which is the first real plant-based burger launched in Indian QSRs. Greenest worked with Burgrill on this launch. So there is, of course, been just a lot of activity, and not only new startups, but also large FMCG players have been playing a key role in basically foraying into this category, not only globally but now in India. As you know, earlier this year, ITC announced their launch of their own products, and ITC is one of India's largest food companies. Apart from launches, though, there have been innovative promotions, like the first plant-based meat brand to run an ad. Blue Tribe Foods ran an ad during the ICC World T20, which was viewed by millions. And you've obviously seen many food brand ads, over the past few years whenever you're on TV. So now, how cool is it that plant-based meat is being recognized by marketers, and it's being viewed by millions. So, and not only these promotions, but in at GFI India, our theory of change is that these products need to be superior on taste, price, and convenience. These three are the main drivers for purchase of plant-based meat products and the success of plant-based meat products. So yes, exactly, plant-based meat is going mainstream. And especially taste, price, and convenience. You've seen like major progress on all these three factors. Not only better products are coming out, but also these products are being priced at very affordable prices sometimes. For example, Amazon India ran a promotion of plant-based meats, offering a huge 96% discount. So and the product they used as a trial for this promotion was Blue Tribe Foods. So a normal Blue Tribe food schema costs around rupees 325. The 96% discount brought it to rupees 11. It is in many cases even cheaper than a samosa or a vada pav. So not only this, but there have been other discounts, like the Haldiram's products I mentioned earlier. They are available at rupees 29 and rupees 45, which is also very, very cheap. It's less than $1. And, in the US, for example, price parity is still a huge concern. It still is, of course, in India as well. But, we can actually get to very affordable prices. And this is really, really encouraging to see. Lastly, I think convenience is a big thing. You can now actually order plant-based meat after a few taps on your phone via Swiggy Instamart. And Swiggy Instamart Swiggy is, of course, one of the biggest delivery giants. Their Instamart service does 1 million deliveries a week. These products are now live in 11 Indian cities. They are mainly Blue Tribe Foods and Good Dot Foods. Good Dot Foods are also available at a 33% discount on these platforms. These products are now available in 11 cities, but will be soon available in 19 Indian cities. So, go ahead and order a plant-based meat product maybe using Swiggy. So the other aspect of this is a category awareness building. Like, celebrities like Shah Rukh Khan and Neeraj Chopra are now becoming brand ambassadors, or are, launching these products directly. Imagine Meats was launched via a tweet from Shah Rukh Khan, and Neeraj Chopra was, joined as the brand ambassador for Good Dot very recently. These are all things that have happened in the last 6 months. And again, this is just the beginning. So meat reduction is much more prevalent globally than just complete meat restriction. So vegans are just less than 3% of the world population, but there's a large cohort of people who want to reduce their meat consumption. And a lot of the products that I just talked about, and a lot of the positioning of many companies globally is not only for vegans, but for everyone. And that is going to be key, especially if this category is to grow, and eventually alternative protein will not be alternative. It has to target everyone. So plant-based meats are gaining acceptance all over. China and India have the largest number of percentage of people who say they would eat plant-based meat and other substitutes. And this is data from one of our early surveys that we did across China, India, and the US. So coming to like when you think about it from a global perspective, we can't just follow a US or a Europe, because dietary patterns are much different. But what we can do is really take clues from some of these mature ecosystems, and see as the market develops in India, and how a lot of the important brands are kind of tying up with QSRs, for example. What are the best practices? We can definitely learn from many of these other markets. I would say we should look at Asia Pacific markets, more so, because Asia Pacific has, similar to India, a very diverse palette. There's no one hero category of product like burgers that people consume regularly, and you really need to look at a wide range of products in India as well as Asia Pacific. And these are just some of the launches that have happened across QSRs. Your Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC, all of them have had successful trials for plant-based meat, and now are rolling plant-based products across the countries in many cases. And this can happen in India too. So Raju, can you put on the next slide? Actually, after this. Yeah, so definitely, watch this space, because a lot of these companies like Cargill, Omnipok, Impossible Foods, they will also potentially enter India in some form or the other. There's already Beyond Meat is present in India, and you can buy their products. Can you go to the next slide? So now coming to the investment, there's of course a lot of investment has happened in the last 3 years, and 2021 was a banner year, not only for plant-based, but there's also fermentation and cultivated meat. They are rapidly catching up. There was definitely some of the largest rounds in the last year were raised by cultivated meat companies, and large access to large capital is very important if we have to scale, especially cultivated meat and fermentation, and really make these products again better tasting, and just across get those price premiums lower. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so coming to more of the global numbers that we are seeing from investment firms and other kind of institutions which do all these projections for many of these industries of the future, like renewables, whether it's again food tech, ag tech. So these are just some of the numbers for plant-based meat and cultivated meat from the sources that our other GFI affiliates, as well as experts in this entire ecosystem, think are going to be the most realistic estimates. Again, you can see that the global plant-based meat market is projected to reach 74 billion to around $100 billion. For cultivated meat, it can at least reach $25 billion by 2030. And we will talk more about India-related projections by 2030 later in the slide. Also note that you see that the projected share of global meat market, all those numbers are less than 10%. So this decade, from 2020 to 2030, we will definitely see a huge rise in alternative protein, but it will be a percentage of the entire meat market share. So, there will be, of course, a lot of adoption, and this is also based on many things happening that need to happen. But we will talk more about this later in the presentation. Yeah, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so I'll now hand over to Raji, who's our consumer insights expert, and she's really led a lot of this work that we've done in the last 2 years. Yeah, so over to you, Raji.
Thank you, Husain. So with that quick overview of the global trends and the potential market size globally, let's take a look at India market. So as we've seen earlier, we'll be covering these key points for India. So which is like identifying the early adopters and what are going to be the drivers of consumption, followed by how are we going to develop the products and how are we going to market them and position them. So quickly looking at India as a market, as we all know, India is the second most populous country in the world. So by 2050, we're going to have 1/6 of the world population living in this country. So again, also one of the myths that we have is like India is a predominantly vegetarian country. But when we look at the consumption trend, what we see is almost 70% of the Indians eat non-vegetarian food. So though the vegetarian population is higher compared to any of the world, other countries in the world, but still we have majority of the population who consume animal-based products, especially beef. So however, the difference in consumption for India compared to other countries is our per capita consumption. So it's one of the lowest in the world. It is largely driven by income, but also there are a lot of other factors that influence this. Say we have a lot of cultural and religious barriers. So like a lot of people who eat non-vegetarian food, they don't have it on certain days of the week, or they do not have it during like festival seasons. And also among the people who eat non-vegetarian, there are a lot of preferences. Some people do not prefer eating meat which has bones, and some people and majority do not consume it on a regular basis because it's a pure reason of like affordability. So with all these factors, though 70% of the people consume non-veg or like meat, the per capita consumption is one of the lowest. However, with the recent developments in the incomes, where the incomes are going up and the people are moving to urban areas, nuclear families, and then the increase in aspirations, and along with the increase in affordability, we are definitely seeing an increase in the consumption of meat, which is at an overall level, the per capita consumption is supposed to raise in the next decade. So like any other category, anything which is new, so has to go through this cycle where there will be like few of the initial adopters who would try this category, and then it goes on to a mass scale where it goes to the early majority, late majority. So plant-based or this entire alternative meats as a sector, or the entire alternative protein sector, which includes meat, dairy, and eggs, today is at an early adopter stage in India. So when we look at some of the mature markets like say US, maybe they have moved little ahead of early adopters and then they are reaching early majority right now. But for India, we are at a stage where we are targeting the early adopters. So let's quickly look at who are these early adopters for this market. So there were multiple studies which have been done. So there were studies done by GFI India, there were studies done by Ipsos, and there was some study done by Pennsylvania State University. So across all these studies, one thing that came up very, very clearly is most of the Indians that we've surveyed, primarily the guys who are living in the urban areas, all of them have very high disposition. They all are like willing to try these products when they are available. So the number is almost in the range of like 60% plus respondents who were surveyed. They are very or extremely likely to try these plant-based products, plant-based meat, when they're available in the market. So quickly looking at who are these early adopters who are willing to try these products. So this is a study that GFI India has done. So we've done one round of survey in 2018, and we followed it up with another survey in 2020. So this is typically going to the consumers in the urban areas, trying to understand their awareness about plant-based meat, and then what is going to be their likeliness to try these products, and then what is their willingness to pay a price premium for these products in the initial years. So when we look at the numbers are very encouraging, with almost 50% of these guys having high awareness about plant-based meat. So along with awareness, almost 70% of the respondents are likely to try plant-based meat. So the interesting thing is almost half of them are also willing to pay a price premium in the initial years. As we all know, the first few years, we will not be able to reach price parity compared to the animal-based products. So the early adopters are the guys who are willing to pay that price premium in the initial years. So looking at who are these guys so this is the profile of these audience who are likely to try these products and who are also willing to pay a price premium for this. So we are looking at a target audience whose age group is in the range of 25 to 44 and who are well educated. Then mostly they have at least a bachelor's degree or higher, and they have better incomes compared to the rest of the population, a monthly household income of about 50,000 Indian rupees, and most of them live in large cities or towns. So apart from the demographics, if you look at what is their consumption patterns, most of these consumers who are interested in trying these meats, plant-based meats or alternate meats, they're omnivores. We are definitely not looking at vegetarians. We are looking at omnivores who consume non-vegetarians and also who consume at a much higher frequency. So in terms of their dietary habits, they are the typical Indian consumer. But the only difference with the others, how early adopters are different from the other consumers, they have a very, very high meat eating frequency. In the earlier slides, we've seen that our overall meat consumption frequency and per capita consumption are lower. But these are the guys who consume meat almost like 8 to 14 times in a week. So typically when we look at the Indian consumption, meat consumption is limited to say some special occasions, like typically your weekend meal or like your Sunday lunch, where you have like something made of chicken or mutton, or like some of those like family gatherings or like some special occasions like birthdays, anniversaries. So mostly meat is typically consumed on special occasions. However, when you look at early adopters, like we've seen in the earlier slide, they have really high consumption of meat. So typically when you look at what are the occasions that these guys consume meat, so this is part of their normal meals. So for them, it has moved beyond the special occasions. So they consume it almost as a part of their day-to-day meals. So along with the day-to-day meals, they also consume meat for most of the special occasions, be it get-togethers with friends, families, or like some occasions like birthdays, anniversaries, or get-togethers at office meetings, lunches. And also some of them, it is part of their diet plan. So along with these occasions, if you look at the day parts that these guys consume meat, so it is consumed across day parts. Like they consume meat for lunch, they consume meat for dinner. So which are the key meal occasions. But there are also about 10% of the occasions where these guys also consume meat for breakfast and snack. So that shows really like how frequently these guys are into animal-based meat. So while their consumption frequency is really high currently, but almost 1/4 of the early adopters are looking at reducing their consumption going forward. So they've mentioned that they do not want to consume, say, any animal-based products, be it dairy, eggs, poultry, mutton, or like fish in the future. So if we quickly look at what are the reasons why these guys are looking at reducing their consumption in the future. So there are a couple of buckets under which we can classify them. The first one is the product-related barriers. So typically when you procure meat, a lot of these people question the hygiene of the meat that they're procuring. So when you go to a conventional butcher, you don't know like what is the temperature that they've stored in or what are the hygiene measures that they've taken. So the hygiene is a big question. So along with that, because of the hygiene measures that are followed, the smell of the meat. So that is also a problem. So along with that, getting it home and then ease of cleaning, cooking, and once consumed, some of the times, a lot of them also feel those that they've had like something really, really heavy and then they're not able to digest it. So these are some of the product related barriers because of which these guys are looking at reducing the consumption in the future. So apart from that, there are also some of the other barriers which we know as a country. We have some of the religious or like community barriers where in certain religions, consumption of certain types of meats is not allowed. So along with that, the overall awareness in terms of like animal cruelty and also the impact on planet because of the industrial animal agriculture. So with all these reasons coming together, some of these early adopters are looking at restricting their consumption going forward. Like we've seen in the earlier slides, which Husain has presented, world over, we are seeing a similar trend. where people are not looking at completely stopping the consumption of animal-based products and turning into vegans. They are looking at meat reduction. Say if I'm consuming it 10 times, I'm going to reduce it to 5 times or like 6 times. That's a more predominant trend than completely stopping it. And that is what is happening in India as well. So by handling these barriers, which is both product related and also like talking about the impact on planet, etc., I think these are some of the good areas for plant-based meat or like other products, other alternatives like dairy eggs manufacturers to make inroads into the consumers, especially the early adopters. So quickly looking at the profile of the plant-based dairy consumer. So these guys are not really different from the plant-based meat consumers. Their profile is pretty much similar. These guys are also again relatively younger. So in the age group of 18 to 44, like what we've seen earlier. And they're again well educated. They have higher incomes and they also live in urban areas. The key difference between the profile of plant-based meat and plant-based dairy consumer is the dietary habits. While the meat consumers are like typically omnivores, the consumers for plant-based dairy are spread across omnivores, vegetarians, and vegans. So when we look at the awareness numbers for plant-based milk, so while the users are totally aware of it, among the non-users, we've seen like high awareness numbers. Almost like every 3 people in among 4 are aware of plant-based milk. And 1/5 of them also have tried one of these products into plant-based milk in the past. So among the plant-based milk, soya milk has the highest awareness because it's a product that's been existing from a lot of years, and then followed by almond milk. But the other products in dairy segment, which is like say plant-based cheese and tofu, they are also picking up pace faster. So again, when we look at the consumption patterns, so most of the people who consume plant-based milk, say almost 90% of them, they also consume animal-based dairy sources right now. So like in the earlier meat section where we've seen, the reduction is what is happening rather than complete restriction. So even here, the consumers who are having plant-based dairy, they're also having animal-based dairy products. So 90% of dual usage is seen here. So which is also saying that going forward, it's not that the consumers are completely going to stop animal-derived products and move to plant-based products. So both of the products are going to coexist. So when we look at how are the consumers consuming these plant-based dairy products, the consumption patterns are not really different compared to an animal-based products. Say for an animal-based products, if you're having milk, like a direct consumption, you put in a glass and have it, or you have it with cereals, or you have it with the beverages like tea, coffee. Plant-based milks are also consumed in a similar fashion, which also again shows that consumers are going to use both the products and they're also going to use for similar purposes. So which is also an important input into product development. Then the products that we are developing in the alternate segment has to be similar in every way to the animal-derived product. So if a consumer is using animal-derived product with breakfast cereals, then the plant-based milk has to be compatible with breakfast cereals, and plant-based milk will have to be compatible with tea and coffee. So quickly moving on to eggs. So again, the consumer profile is going to be similar for both meat, dairy, and eggs for all of them. But again, when you look at the difference is again in the dietary habits. For meat, while we are looking only at omnivores, for both dairy and eggs, we are looking at vegetarians and non-vegetarians. Because eggs is something that is consumed almost by everyone. So if you look at this data, 48% of the omnivores and 42% of the vegetarians consume eggs almost every day. And there's another 38% of the vegetarians who consume it almost 2 to 3 times a week, which shows that both the segments have very good potential for the plant-based alternatives. So when we look at what is the kind of consumption that these guys have. Like in meat, we have seen that they consume it almost like 8 to 14 times in a week. So when we look at plant-based eggs, So the vegetarians and omnivores, they almost like consume 12 to 14 eggs in a week, which is on an average 2 eggs in a day. So again, similar to meat, eggs are also consumed by most of these early adopters as part of their normal or regular meals. So it's not something that they consume only for special occasions. It's something that they have on a day-to-day basis. And similar to meat, so eggs are also part of most of their diet plans. So one thing that is emerging clearly is for these early adopters, consumption of meat, dairy, eggs is also part of their nutrition or part of their diet plans. They're consciously consuming them for their health or protein requirements. So when we look at the numbers for eggs, similar to meat, we also see almost like 50% plus awareness levels for plant-based eggs. And almost 70% of the consumers among both non-vegetarians and vegetarians, they are willing to try plant-based eggs if they are available in the market. And there's also like 70% of the vegetarians and 50% of the non-vegetarians who are willing to pay a price premium. So when we say they are willing to pay a price premium, so this also comes with certain conditions like it's not going to last forever. Maybe in the initial years, they are willing to pay that price premium and try it. But for it to become a regular part of their diet, then it has to attain price parity with the animal-based products. And also when they say when they're willing to pay a price premium, the price premiums also cannot be like 100% higher than animal-based products or a 200%. So those also have to be thought through. So quickly summarizing this session, the first section. So early adopter for alternative meat, dairy and eggs. So these are the young guys who are typically in the 20 to 44 age bracket. The guys who are well educated with better incomes living in urban areas. And we are targeting omnivores for alternate meat and both omnivores and vegetarians for dairy and eggs. So like we've seen, all these early adopters are very high in terms of like frequency of usage and also consumption. For them, consuming this animal-based meat, dairy and eggs is almost like a daily affair. So they don't need any special occasions, but they do also consume these products for special occasions as well. And all these consumers have good awareness levels for alternate protein products, and they are highly likely to try these products and are also willing to pay a price premium in the initial days. So quickly moving on to the drivers of consumption. So what we're trying to look at here is what are the drivers or what are the reasons because of which they are consuming these products today, the animal derived products. So therefore we can, while developing the product and then the other pricing and all other aspects of marketing, we will have to follow these drivers so that we are providing the right product, right pricing and other aspects to the consumers. So when we look at the drivers for plant-based meat, so typically when you ask a consumer, what is the primary reason that they're consuming animal-based meat? Taste comes as a primary driver. So when we say taste, it's not only taste, there are a lot of the entire sensorial journey that the consumer experiences when they have animal-based meat. So that is very, very critical. So if you look at the slides here, in terms of drivers, so apart from taste, consumers are also talking about the juiciness of the meat. They're talking about the aroma or smell of cooking. And they're also talking about the experience of eating with bones for certain meats like, say, lamb or mutton. So while developing products in the alternative meat space, so it is very important not only to get the taste right, but also to provide the entire sensorial experience. When they're cooking the alternate meats, say plant-based or cultivated, so this has to offer similar experience like in terms of juiciness, texture, or when the consumer is cooking, the color of the meat or the smell while they're cooking. So after taste, the other important driver for them is convenience. So what happens with meat at a family level is the entire family likes it. So therefore it becomes easy for the household to get a particular type of dish and then everybody is satisfied or everybody is happy with it rather than they're trying to make different things for different people. So apart from everybody liking it, if you look at the availability, meats, animal-based meats are available all over. Like you have your neighborhood butcher to the organized retail formats. So it's very, very easily available. And also a lot of consumers think that it is easy to clean, cook, and prepare. So taste followed by the convenience. These are some of the key drivers for consumption of meats. So like we've discussed in the earlier slides, for the early adopters, the meat consumption is not only about indulgence, while for the majority of the mass market, meat consumption is still an indulgence in India. But for these early adopters, apart from the indulgence, they consciously consume meat for the protein requirement and for its nutrition part of it. So therefore, it is important for alternate meats as well to tackle this health part. So to supply similar amount of protein or the nutrition that consumers are looking from animal-based meat. So in terms of pricing, while consumers do not like really put it at a higher number, but we all know that pricing or value for money, these are some measures consumers do not like rate as generally in consumer service, they do not come as top drivers. But when a consumer actually walks to a store and then the key purchasing decision, so cost and price makes like a huge difference. So therefore, it's very, very important to focus on price and value for money factors if we are looking at adoption of the category on a regular basis. So moving on to plant-based dairy. So while taste comes as the primary driver for meat, when it comes to plant-based dairy, health and well-being comes as the primary driver. So like many consumers do not put dairy at the same level in terms of taste as meats, but they have it on a regular basis because of the health and nutrition benefits that it gives. So similar to dairy, even for eggs, they are not like really, consumers do not talk about taste as the primary driver, but they're consciously consuming it for the health and nutrition and also for the protein requirement. So apart from health, like convenience, like we've seen in mutton, so that's very, very important driver for eggs. Like if you look at the distribution of eggs, it's easily available. So it's available in your like neighborhood kirana store or like even the pan bidi shop that is next door to you. So it's available everywhere. And in some of the urban cities, the guy comes home and delivers them. So availability is like huge for eggs. And also it is very easy and faster to cook. So however we make it, we either make it like a boiled egg, poached egg, or an omelette. So it's like very, very easy. So to beat the convenience of egg, it is really, really tough for other products. So therefore, health and nutrition is very, very critical for all three products, which is beef, dairy, and eggs. But taste is equally important, and convenience is also like a key driver in adoption. So like we've discussed in the earlier slides, while cost might not come up as one of the top drivers, but when you look at the pricing for some of these products in the market today, in relation to the animal-based meat products that are available, so we see a price premium anywhere from a 30% to for some of the products going up to like 300%, 400%. So maybe in the initial days, like we discussed, the consumers are willing to pay this price premium and they would pay for trials. But for the consumers to adopt them as part of their regular meals and then increase the frequency of consumption, we will need to definitely work on price, and we'll have to reach the price parity sooner than later. So if you look at some of these, especially for the egg products, the price difference is huge. So with this such kind of like price difference and easy availability, so unless we crack these two things, it becomes tough for consumers to adopt plant-based eggs and replace conventional eggs. So quickly moving on to product assortment. So like in mature markets like US, so we've seen like many companies launching products in like say Burger King, McDonald's, and then other formats. Because they have one hero category, it becomes easy for manufacturers or startups to create those products and distribute them. Because the Americans typically consume 3 burgers in a week and they have one hero category. But when we look at India, like we all know, we have like, it has multiple national dishes. So the palette changes from south to north to east, and sometimes even within south also, you have like different tastes. And within a state, a lot of times we see a difference in the taste profile and difference in dishes, even with a 100-mile radius. So therefore, India has like multiple dishes. So that's also a good thing because there is a lot of scope for innovation for the manufacturers. So some of the products that we could look at as like the low-hanging fruits. So when it comes to meat, whether it is home cooked or like ordered from outside, biryani is something that tops the chart. So if you look at the number of orders on Swiggy, Zomato, or like the number of times biryani is made at home, I don't think any other product is like a close match to that. So that's definitely a product with a lot of potential for plant-based or cultivated meat alternatives. And after biryani, we have typically in most of the Indian households, we have different types of gravy preparations with meats. So it could be like mutton gravy, chicken gravy, or like butter chicken. So there are different types of gravy preparations depending on the region, which includes meat. So that is one of the other key opportunity. So when you look at dairy, so milk is the largest in terms of market share, followed by ghee. And we also have other products like paneer, curd, and yogurt, and ice creams, which also are like those smaller compared to milk, but they also have potential, especially in the urban markets. So some of the other products which also could be like an entry products into the segment are the snacking segment. So where we have like lollipops, kebabs, momos. So these are the products which are not as like being meat, but as an accompaniment. But in a lot of times, what we've also seen is consumers are far more willing to experiment in these side categories than in their main meal. So some working around some of these categories would also be a good entry point. So in terms of like what are the formats that one can work around? So while we know India as a market, we all prefer fresh meat. So where we would just walk into the neighborhood butcher and then just buy it and get it home. But off late, when we are looking at the market, so we are seeing a lot of options, and especially these early adopters are experimenting with meat, which is say marinated or chilled, or which is like ready to eat. So the plant-based or alternative meats also can try and look at experimenting with some of this. Like we could develop formats which are say pre-marinated or like which are ready to heat or ready to eat in the market. So when we look at like one of the data point that we have from an online meat retail is the ready to cook products, which are like say kebabs and then the marinated products, or like the ready to eat chicken and prawn based spreads. They're almost 20% of the sales of most of these online meat retail channels, which also shows the potential for some of the products that we've discussed in the earlier slide, the snacking segment, which could be a good entry point or a low hanging fruit for the startups or entrepreneurs. So, and while developing the product, when we look at the type of cuts that one could look at, so leg pieces, breasts, and wings are the most popular among the cuts. So apart from that, depending on the occasion, suppose there are any special occasions, so we also see usage of formats like ribs and chops, etc. But otherwise, the most popular products are these three. So leg pieces, breasts, and wings. So like we've seen most of the fresh meat consumption is like the most popular. So, but when we look at the landscape of current products in the market, there are very few companies which are working in the ambient temperature range. And most of the other products are working at a deep freezer. So most of the products are right now at an minus 18 degrees storage conditions. But over a period of time, I think we can work and then we can get products into the ambient temperature. Can I just take a break and have a little bit of water, please?
Absolutely.
So moving on to the milk products. So the products that we can look at, so among plant-based milk, so there is almond milk and there is soya milk, which are the most popular products. So in terms of like when we look at the numbers, almond milk has better awareness. However, soya milk has higher penetration. So this could be a factor of like pricing. because the almond milk is priced at a much higher, much higher compared to the soya milk. So when we look at like the products that one can work on, so along with almond milk, soya milk, so there are a lot of other products that are coming into the market, which is like say rice milk, oat milk. So these are all the opportunities for the manufacturers to look at. And apart from that, we also have products like cheese, tofu, yogurt, which we have looked at in the earlier slides. So when we look at the consumer patterns, so here again among milks, so most consumers, like we've said, there is a dual usage. So they use both animal-based milk and plant-based milk. But again, within plant-based milk also, consumers tend to experiment. So there are very few consumers who stick only to one type of milk. Say they'll consume only almond milk or they'll consume only soy milk. So approximately 40% of the plant-based milk consumers have used more than one type of plant-based milk in the past 12 months. That really shows that the early adopters who are getting into this category are in the trial and error phase. So they are trying different types of milk and then they are picking up whichever they like, and or also maybe they are using it for multiple occasions. Say if I am having it for tea and coffee, maybe I'm using a different type of milk vis-a-vis when I'm having it like with breakfast cereal or directly just the milk. So maybe I'm using a different type of milk. But predominantly what we are seeing is almost 40% of these consumers are using multiple products. So there's a lot of curiosity and experimentation that's happening right now. So which is also a like great opportunity for the brands in the sector. So quickly looking at eggs, like we've discussed, so they're part of day-to-day meals and they're really fast and convenient to make. So some of the formats that consumers use them most often is, one is boiled eggs, that's the top of the charts, followed by the omelette and the curry preparation similar to meat, where like some gravy, there are eggs put in it. And there is anda bhurji, which is a fried form of it, which is most popular across India. So the top ones are say boiled eggs, omelette, curry preparations, and anda bhurji. So these are some of the formats that one can look at while developing products for this alternative eggs. So quickly moving on to marketing and positioning. So like all products, all the alternative meat, dairy and eggs are typically consumed as a family. We don't see many consumers only consuming for themselves. So in terms of like, if you look at the data here, almost 83% of the users consume plant-based milk as a family opposed to just the individual. So which again reinstates that households consume milk, whichever, whether it is like plant-based or animal derived, as a family unit. So when we look at similar data for eggs, again, we see that eggs are also mostly consumed as a family unit and not individually. So basically this says that all three categories, meat, dairy and eggs, it is a household consumption. So when we are looking at marketing or positioning, so we are looking at an entire household rather than just targeting or like talking to an individual in the house. And also, what are some of those expressions, or like what does this consumption means to various people? So out of these categories, especially meat has like a lot of significance in consumer's household when it is cooked or when it is consumed. And it also means different things to different stage in life. So like some of the examples that we could look at here is, so suppose there is a double income and no kid couple who is living in an urban area. So these are typically the consumers for whom there is a household help who makes on a day-to-day basis, she makes the food at home. But these are the guys who are interested in exploring new cuisines, new dishes. So over the weekends, maybe they'll try like new restaurants, or like they'll try and cook new dishes themselves by like looking at recipes from the internet or like taking it from some friends. So for this cohort of audience, non-veg consumption is more of exploration. And moving on to the nuclear families. So in this, the thrill that comes from like making a new recipe, or the thrill that comes from seeing your family members enjoy their meal is very, very important. So in this, the kind of positioning is like self-expression. And moving on to like something like a joint family where there are a lot of people, and then it is really tough to make something to appeal to everybody. So here time is very, very critical. And then they are looking for something that can appeal to everybody in the household and then not taking so much time. So therefore the positioning has to be in similar lines. And coming to other segment, which is also say 10% of the early adopters, they also consume non-veg outside their home, because in their home they do not cook non-vegetarian meals because of the religious or like cultural barriers. So for them it is like self-gratification. So depending on the audience, so while we are targeting the entire household, but depending on the stage of life that they are in and then the lifestyle that they have, we will have to position them, or we will have to have different messaging for each one of them. So some of the low-hanging fruits that we have identified through some of the call work that we've done with the consumers of non-vegetarian food. So typically, like we've discussed in the earlier slides, even for a non-vegetarian, in India, they do not consume non-vegetarian food all 365 days in a year, or like all 7 days in a week. So there are days where non-veg is not allowed because of religious reasons. So you see a lot of people not having non-veg on a Tuesday or like on a Saturday. So these are some of the days where you could position plant-based meat or alternative meats. So offering similar taste and experience, but there is no animal-based products involved. Similarly, during festivals. So some of the festivals, or most of the festivals, depending on the community, on those days, you're not allowed to have, again, non-veg food because of the religious or cultural reasons. So these two occasions are some of the low-hanging fruits where you could offer similar indulgence without compromising on your religious or cultural beliefs. Some of the other opportunities are like, say, typically in your office meals. A lot of people are not very comfortable carrying meals, non-vegetarian meals to office because of the smell or like because of the entire experience of eating. Say people are not comfortable eating with a bone and then chew it in office surroundings. So therefore, this is one of the occasions, or like the meals, office meals are something where we could have alternative meats taking over. And also like say typical get-togethers at households where you have a mix of like non-vegetarian and vegetarian consumers. So we could have a mix of both these products. And also the other important segment, like we've seen in the earlier slide, the out of home consumption, where the households where some of the members of the household, they consume non-vegetarian meals and they like consuming it, but they cannot cook at home for the reasons of like, say, the religious or cultural barriers. So these guys can carry this. It's a good entry point for those households where you can get the similar experience, but there are no other barriers. So while positioning, it's also critical when we are talking about the kind of like feelings that consumers have, or like the kind of emotions that the consumers have after having a meal which has meat. So typically when a consumer has meat, the animal-based meat, so some of the top feelings that the consumers feel is they feel energetic. They also, like most of the times, it's associated with cravings. You felt like having that particular meat. Say you felt like having that mutton curry, or you felt like having that biryani or butter chicken. So those cravings were satisfied, or like consumers are feeling indulged, rewarded, or like happy. So it is very, very critical for the products in the alternative space also to evoke similar feelings. So after having this meal, the consumer should feel equally like indulged or rewarded, or their craving should be satisfied. They should not be left saying, okay, I was craving for a biryani, but this is not the right experience. So the product has to meet those demands. And also, like while talking about the emotions or the expressions, we should talk about this. So the other important positioning opportunity is we've also seen consumers coming back and saying, though it's not a huge portion, but almost like 20% or like 1/6 of the consumers saying, after consuming non-veg, they also felt heavy. Like most of the consumers feel like, okay, going to sleep, or some of them also felt like acidic. And there are also consumers, like we mentioned in the earlier slides, they feel guilty. They feel that there is animal cruelty involved. So these are some of the opportunities to target the early adopters, where we can talk about offering similar indulgence, similar experience, without having the guilt of like say killing an animal, or without having like to feel acidic or any other like heaviness. So these are some of the cues that one should look for while developing products and also while communicating to the consumers. So when we look at how are we like developing the products and labeling the products, so we have some data for milk in this segment, which is also applicable for both meat and dairy. So for eggs and dairy, sorry, eggs and meat. So what we've seen is typically the early adopters, when they shop for these products, they pay attention to the labels. So they read labels while shopping, be it plant-based products or be it animal-based products. And while reading the labels, they read both the front of the pack and the back of the pack. So therefore, it's also an opportunity for us to communicate the right messages on the packs. So when you look at what are the kinds of things that one notices on the packs, like we know typically many consumers look at what is the date of packaging, or like when is it going to expire, or also they also check like what is the price of this product, or like are there any promos or discounts available. So apart from that, a lot of users who are into the alternative product category, which is like meat, dairy, and eggs, they check for facts like, okay, what is the ingredient list? What are the nutrition facts? What is the protein content? So this could also be emerging from the fact that these are new product categories into the market. So the awareness levels are low. So therefore consumers are reading the labels to understand what is there in the product. So therefore it is important. It is also one of the important platforms where we could communicate the right messages to the consumers. And similarly, like when you look at the terms, like the terminology that is used. So for plant-based. So plant-based is a term that most consumers associate with rather than like using a term of like vegan. So some of these things can help in developing the packaging for all these products. So also when it comes to retail, so we've also asked respondents like where should these products be in the retail shelf? Should they be like stocked next to the animal-based products, or should they be stocked separately? But most of the consumers, almost like 80% of them, they believe that it is very, very important for these categories to be placed next to the animal-based products. So it also shows, like we've seen in the earlier side, there is dual consumption, like the consumers are like omnivores and then everybody. So it is typically like, it is very easy for the consumers, like when they're walking through the aisle, there is an animal-based product and next to that there is a plant-based product. So they would be picking up, it is easy for them to pick up the product rather than again going to a different aisle or like different area. So those are some of the insights on understanding who's the target consumer and then what are the drivers and product assortment. So we'll now quickly move into what is going to be the market potential in India. So like we've seen in the earlier slides, there is like a potential of almost like starting from a 75 billion for plant-based meat and a 25 billion for cultivated meat for 2030, which even with those huge numbers, we are only targeting like a part of the meat market. So say plant-based is looking at say 5 to 7% of the meat market, and cultivated is looking at even like less than 1% of the meat market by 2030. So India doesn't have any numbers like that. So there's a study that GFI has done with Deloitte to understand what is going to be the market potential for Indian market specifically. So I'll leave it to Husain to run you all through those numbers. Husain, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Raji. Can you move on to the next slide? So over the last few years, since GFI India has been working with stakeholders across the ecosystem, whether it is startups, industry, investors, or governments, everyone has asked us this question at one point or the other. What is the market size of the smart protein sector? And how can it impact India's economy? So we set about, I think, answering some of these questions, and we use 2030 as a time frame. And we've partnered with Deloitte India on this. And the way we conducted this analysis was we had rigorous modeling and interviews with stakeholders and experts across the global ecosystem for smart protein. And we've also, are going to be releasing a report on this pretty soon. We are putting the final touches to the analysis as well as, the report, and that should be released in the next couple of months. So I'll just briefly explain what some of the numbers that have and top level insights that have emerged from this analysis. Um, yeah, so the way we used a lot of the projections, the way they work is we don't have just one number that is many times very rigid. A lot of these studies that we've also looked at earlier in the presentation, they have scenarios. So in our case, we had the base scenario, upside one and upside two, and there are many assumptions underpinning each of these scenarios. So first, coming to the domestic market size for all three categories: plant-based meat, plant-based dairy, and plant-based eggs. The domestic market size for plant-based meat in 2030 could range from 1,280 crore INR to around 3,427 crore. The domestic market size for plant-based dairy could range from, in 2030, could range from around 3,400 crore to potentially 9,000 crore. And the domestic market size for plant-based eggs in 2030 could range from around 420 crore to 1,275 crore. It's important to note that all these numbers are, potential market size and potential, for exports. These are not like set in stone. There has to be a lot of work done to even reach the base case scenario. So
on this point, if you could perhaps shed us a little light on what the base case assumptions, upside one and upside two assumptions are, that might help attendees contextualize this data a little bit better.
Sure. So for plant-based meat and dairy in the base case, and actually across categories in the base case, we are looking at the category just breaching the early adopter market that we've talked about quite a bit earlier in this presentation. But for plant-based dairy as well as meat, we are looking at for the upside cases, especially upside two, we are looking at assumptions that these products would breach not only some of the early adopter category, but an early majority. And globally also, this category is supposed to breach at least the early majority category by 2030. Again, there's other assumptions like price parity, which is reached, and then there's adoption replacement. Multiple factors go into this modeling. And price parity is something which is interesting because across categories, price parity is, it can vary because certain meats like mutton and, seafood, they may be easier to attain price parity because with conventional products than let's say a chicken, egg, or even dairy, which are much more challenging to attain price parity, especially in India. And so I think a lot of these assumptions just build into much of this modeling. So
makes sense. Yeah, thank you for that extra information. Yeah,
exactly. And I would go on to the export potential now. The export potential for, I think, plant-based meat is currently around 2,194 crore in the base case to 6,824 crore in the upside case. And then the export potential for plant-based dairy by 2030 could range from anywhere from 459 crore to 1,889 crore. And, you would see that in the domestic market size, dairy, again, is larger than meat, and in export potential, meat is larger than dairy. The reasons for this are that we are also looking at all these percentages for export as well as domestic market size as a percentage of the entire meat industry. meat and dairy consumption. So, for example, dairy consumption in India is so high in the domestic market that even a small percent, even if plant-based meat were to, or plant-based dairy were to capture a small percentage of that would be huge numbers compared to meat consumption, which is, of course, it's going to rise in the next decade, but it's nowhere near dairy consumption. And for export potential, with plant-based meats, there are already companies like Good Dot who are exporting to other countries, and there's of course a lot of product, specialization that can really help. Like our chicken tikkas, our seekh kebabs, all these products can have a significant market because these are specialized products. With dairy, it's also, you have to note that in the big markets, export markets like US and Europe and even Asia Pacific, there already exist a lot of options. That is something to consider. But again, with plant-based dairy, also in a lot of these categories, you never know how these will evolve because these are such new categories. So we just need to take these numbers and understand the context. Yeah, the main point here is that 2020 to 2030, this next decade, in fact now we are almost 2020, like in the next 8 years, in fact, time's really flying by. The next decade is going to be very critical to really set us up for success. And our modeling really agrees with a lot of the modeling that has been done globally, and by other organizations, by other affiliates, that plant-based and alternative protein in general will be a percentage of the market, overall market. But 2020 to 2030 can really, if we do things right across science, business, policy, and we can really set ourselves up for success. And market adoption can really increase post 2030 because of the amount of work we do in terms of supply chain, as well as let's say in terms of supply, building the whole industry from the ground up, really. Supply chain, capital, it's all really, infrastructure is really, really required. We can't really compare it to other categories like, for example, mobile phones and smartphones and smartphone apps, which have really, really quick adoption. And, millions of people will download an app over a few days, few weeks. That's not how, the food and agriculture industry works. If you're looking to really transform the system, we need to do a lot of work on the ground. And especially in this year, in this decade, it's really critical that we do that. Uh, Raji will actually tell you that food categories take decades to become, ubiquitous, to become, something that's part of the norm. She herself worked at, McDonald's and with other QSR chains. it took 15 to 20 years for all these, QSR chains to really capture the Indian market and capture a significant share of the Indian market. So, we have to be patient. We have to work, and there's definitely a lot of potential already. Even if we are able to reach anywhere close to any of these cases, that's quite a significant achievement. And yeah, definitely there's just a lot of work to be done. That's why we are here. That's why GFI India is here. That's why you guys are all seeing, and participating in ISPIC. And really, I think I would like to potentially end the seminar with, I think, with this line. We definitely need to make a case here for India that India could be a leader of a future where alternative proteins is no longer alternative. And it's really, I think, part of the norm. And we really have the opportunity here to really, take our agri biodiversity and other aspects, other, I think, advantages that India has in terms of capacity building. So I can now hand it over to Shardul for the Q&A section.
Sure. Thank you so much, Husain, for that context on market potential about exports in the domestic market. We'll go on to the Q&A section. I'll say leave on the slide deck, Raji, so that we can refer back to any slides as people are asking these questions for data, because these are pretty data heavy slides. And I'm sure people will spend more time with the recording of the session so that, they can think about these specific finer insights at their own time as well, but just starting with the Q&A. So one question which is kind of a common theme for some of them has been that, okay, this data is for plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, right? Raji and Husain, primarily. Raji, if you want to switch on a camera as well. But if you can extrapolate or at least help people understand how we can think about fermentation and cultivated meat, eggs, and dairy categories in India. What I've replied is obviously it's a very, early days as a category, right? It's still being built. Companies have not really launched products in the market. There are regulatory approvals that are not there. Only Singapore is the country which is kind of selling it currently. But any primary thoughts on how people who are attending today and looking at this data primarily from plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy category, how can they think about fermentation and cultivated categories as well when they're thinking about market size, potential, etc.?
Thanks, Shardul. So when we look at the market size, we've definitely done some work in this Deloitte module trying to look at the market size from different category perspective. So when we publish the report, maybe sometime like this year in the next quarter or so, we will have the numbers detailed out not only for the plant-based segment, but also for the fermentation derived and the cultivated segments. So we will publish the market size, the domestic market size numbers. So that's one of the market size. And two, in terms of the consumer data, well, most of the data that we have put together right now and also the work that we've done in the last couple of years is primarily focused on plant-based. That's also because the products that are available in the market right now are mostly plant-based, be it in India or be it in other countries in the world, including the mature markets like the US and Europe. So, so the work will start as and when we see more products coming into the market. But what I can also add is I would not think the consumer trends to be really, really different. Because for the end consumer, when I'm having, say, an alternative meat product, say there is a chicken keema or a mutton keema that is coming in an alternative way, the consumer is going to compare it to the animal-based counterpart and then see if it is meeting the taste, texture, and other parameters like price, convenience, rather than just looking into the way it is produced. While I'm not saying that the way it is produced is not important, but if the end product is going to meet the consumer's expectations in terms of all these parameters, I think the way in which it is produced is not going to be really, really the differentiator. So most of the data insights that we have looked at today are also applicable to the other sectors is what my gut feel is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also think so, because ultimately you're creating food products, right? Whether you're working as an entrepreneur, wanting to create a venture in fermentation derived meat, eggs, and dairy products, or cultivated or cell-based meat, eggs, and dairy products, ultimately you're looking at creating food products which have to be approved. So a lot of these insights would stay true, because you have to think about these insights as meat, egg, dairy kind of insights, which are ultimately translating into plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy. Having said that, are we also looking at seafood as a part of meat when we're talking about meat throughout the session? If not, what about plant-based seafood as a category, and any further thoughts or insights when we were doing all of this analysis on how that category might look like for people who are working on plant-based seafood specifically, or seafood alternatives?
So yes, when we worked on the domestic consumption and export potential, etc., so we've also looked at fish as a category. So we will also again publish the numbers by category, which is dairy, eggs, chicken, mutton, and fish, when we publish the market sizing numbers this year, like I've mentioned. And in terms of the consumer insights, when we have looked at some of the awareness numbers, willingness to try, etc., while we've captured the data at an overall bucket level, which is the plant-based segment, but the consumption patterns, when we look at it, we did capture them by the specific protein. Like when you look at it, how many consumers did not want to consume fish going forward, or also there are specific insights from GFI India about fish, in terms of what are the kinds of fish that is preferred, and then what are the consumption occasions and all of that. We are also working on some white papers specifically by each and every protein. So there will be a white paper on chicken, there'll be a white paper on fish, and there'll be something on mutton. So we will try and publish them in the next quarter, so which can also offer a lot of insights to the manufacturers or startups specifically working in each one of these segments. But we do have those insights by each protein type.
Makes sense. Thank you, Raji. And I think there's a question around insect proteins and microbial proteins. So I'll say microbial protein and food products as a category is obviously, like I said, still being developed, right? So what I would recommend is think about other alternatives to microbial based ingredients when you're having those discussions with VC firms or investors, to kind of broadly draw some back of the envelope calculations on what your export potential might look like or what your domestic market size might look like. But ultimately, you should be able to, rely on some of the insights from today to talk about the category in general of alternatives. And insect proteins at GFI India or GFI globally, we don't really focus on insect protein as we have stated in multiple sessions previously. And that's primarily because compared to the three key pillars that we focus on in the challenge and outside of the challenge in our work in India as well, plant-based, cultivated and fermentation-derived proteins, or meat, eggs and dairy products. And that's because those three are much better than insect proteins as a technology source. So if you have to shift the world away from the current animal agriculture-based food system to a better system, why settle for something which is marginally better compared to something which can be relatively much better? Because still you're using intermediary of insects, and again, public perception concerns, etc., also exist. A case specifically for India could be made from the fact that compared to European countries or France, where insect protein is also taking up quite a lot, Indians in general have a relatively lesser tendency towards eating insect-based products. So as a category awareness creation, it will take a lot of time, and it will be relatively difficult to do that as well compared to, say, plant-based meat or fermentation or cultivated meat, eggs and dairy products. So that's about that question. But anything to add there on insect-based protein, Raji or Husain?
Nothing much, Shardul. I think you've covered it all.
Awesome, great. So outside of it, I think we had some questions around B2B as a area of business for startups focusing on B2B rather than B2C. Are there any suggestions for market analysis for B2B, specifically in terms of the channels of distribution? Are there any? So one entrepreneur also asks about, for B2B ingredient suppliers, are there any key things to keep in mind while, I don't know, doing market research, etc. So any general broad insights on that kind of a channel of distribution or end product of consumers would be helpful, Raj.
So we do have some resources on like our food service and retail advisory, and we would be also looking at publishing these decks in the next month, and I think these have some pretty good insights on what to focus on when I think focusing on different channels, especially as in terms of distribution. We have done that work over the last year, and now we are in the stages of publishing a deck for that. And Raji, feel free to add anything else.
Thanks, Husain. So in terms of B2B, like Husain mentioned, there are multiple channels here. So food service industry is one of the critical partner there. And we've seen in most of the mature markets, this industry has played a key role in creating the awareness and also like creating the first level distribution for these products. So once the awareness is created there, the products have moved to the retail channels in other countries and moved into the consumer households. So we have, like Husain mentioned, some insights on the food service industry, which we'll be publishing soon. But on a broad level, yes. So even when we are going into the food service industry, the end consumer is important, because the consumer is not going to replace his existing consumption of, say, a chicken biryani or any other like conventional product with the plant-based or like any other alternative products, unless we meet the consumer expectations. That's one. And the second one is, after meeting the consumer expectations, it is equally important to meet the expectations of the partner that we are working with. Say if there is a food service industry, so if there is a certain way they do animal-based products, So we have to ensure that the cooking times are similar and the preparation methods are similar. It's easy for them to store, and then it is easy for them to cook, and their gross margins are similar. And then they cannot like really price it very, very high compared to their animal-based products. And the credit cycles are important, logistics are important. So it is very important to understand how the animal-based products work, and also like try and replicate it in a similar way, because none of the channel partners are really going to invest separately for these products, especially at this stage, because we don't know what is the kind of takeoff that will happen in the initial days. So those are some of the insights which we have worked on, and then we are going to publish very soon. And we are also planning to do some work with the distributors, etc. this year, which we will like again come back and then share the insights soon.
Sounds good. Yeah. So absolutely, I'll request all the attendees to sign up for our JF Ideas India community on the website and also our newsletter, so that you're the first ones to kind of get an update when these reports are going to be external facing and out. All the work we do is ultimately meant to be put on our websites as a pro bono resource or open access resource, because ultimately we are a non-profit working on building the entire ecosystem. So make rest assured it's going to be available on our websites. I think a couple of questions were also around. So just a quick question I had for Raji was on pricing, right? And how can people, I can also start by answering Gauri that when we're talking about reducing the pricing and taste, price, and convenience, and then using that as a specific area to gain some sort of a competitive advantage, and also because the end consumer is price sensitive, cost sensitive in our country. So you can think about this, the session today. This is a basic session in understanding for anybody, whether you're in corporate, whether you're a startup, whether you're a researcher thinking about developing new products. I think at every consideration in new product development cycle, you'll have to think about the ingredients you're using, the end use cases from the insights we've learned today. And there are a lot of opportunities and distribution. We have a session on Saturday where a lot of your questions would also find answers around B2B research models, around go-to-market, scale up. So we can ask and discuss those questions on the session on Saturday. But at the same time, I'll recommend you to think about, for example, one example I can give here is shelf stability, right? A lot of these milk, eggs, and dairy products and meat products are primarily refrigerated or frozen. We don't have that supply chain infrastructure. So can you as a food scientist or a food science researcher or a chemical engineer think about developing processes or products which are shelf stable relatively, and at the same time they reconstitute to give the sensory properties that people are used to eating, given all of the use cases and the factors that we've kind of seen today. So I'll say, you work with these insights and kind of marry the science and technology aspects of your new product development cycle into it, and then think about key opportunity areas where the cost could be reduced, given the fact that plant-based proteins at scale ultimately would probably be cheaper compared to the whole system of animal agriculture, because the source takes less resources to grow, etc., etc. So having said that, different plant proteins will have different functionalities, and you'll have to think about cost cutting through all of those mechanisms, but at the same time also tapping into specific insights like Raji was mentioning earlier about chicken keema, mutton keema, and their plant-based variants. So mutton keema, because mutton is a cheaper or expensive meat compared to chicken, there's more margin to play with in terms of tapping into your early adopter cohort in terms of your pricing. At the same time, for chicken keema, because your margins are relatively less. So I'm in Amravati. My friend buys a lot of chicken for his restaurant, and he was telling me the price might change anywhere between 150 to 200 bucks for a kg because he buys them in bulk, and that's cheaper than paneer in many cases, right? So it's difficult to create plant-based chicken, which is also catering to a lot of mass market, which is price sensitive. So that's why I think there are multiple aspects to look at when you're thinking about cost cutting and using these insights to reduce your pricing. I hope that helps. If there's a follow-up question, feel free to ask in the chat. Any further thoughts on this, Raji or Husain?
Like Husain mentioned in his the market sizing, price parity is one of the key pillars which will define the market sizing or market potential for not only for India, but the market size all over the world. So today, if you look at it, or maybe even the bigger companies like Beyond Meats or Impossible also have not attained price parity for like more than a couple of products. So the day we reach a price parity or like a closer price to the conventional animal-based products, that's the day I think the category is going to like really take off. So moving from the early adopters into the early majority and then so on and so forth later. So meanwhile, to reach that kind of price parity, yeah, like you mentioned, while it might be easy for some categories like say mutton and fish because they are already expensive, it'll be very tough for categories like chicken and eggs, which are like very, very cheap. So therefore the R&D and then all the work that is going into the ingredients and also the scale of production. Because right now the scale of production of alternative products is like very, very like small the animal-based products. So it's a chicken and egg story because till the time you don't have demand, we are not going to have the huge scale of like production. So slowly it is going to pick up as and when we have like that kind of like product development, which includes all of this, including the logistics and the economies of scale. So the price parity will happen. But till then, I think the entire effort is to like attain price parity or like even make it cheaper than conventional animal-based products, especially for countries like India, because we do not consume it on a regular basis. So once we crack the affordability, the taste, the price convenience, like we talk about, I think that's the day it'll like take off.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think we are over time, but just taking one last question about market research and tools used for market research, especially when we are thinking about probably doing market research for these categories, like a young startup who's starting out with products in the market, especially if they're using a e-marketplace kind of business model. Are there some question? Otherwise, we can also request this on mail and take it offline.
See, typically in today's time, a lot of market research is also happening digitally. And depending on the stage that we are in, and depending on the research objective or the business objective, we do like use tools. Say if you're an early startup and then you're looking at testing the products with the consumer, then you could start with say an early qualitative study where you could like test your products with some consumers. Again, while testing, there are like multiple ways of testing. You could test the products blind or you could test the products branded. So it all depends on what is the business objective and what is the research objective. So if any of you have any questions regarding that, I think we are always available at GFI India. You could always drop in an email and then we can get back to you with what could be the right methodology and also like who could be the partners who will be like more efficient and affordable for the scale of the business and all of that. Because I think it's a very big question and it is very tough to like answer each and like go through each and every methodology on this call.
Absolutely. We are very happy to take in more collaborative offerings around that. If you're doing any market research, consumer research, feel free to get in touch with our team. Like you might have understood through this session, this data is not really available anywhere, right? Let alone have open access in our country because it's such a data dark economy to begin with, like I said, and this category is relatively new. So not many people are currently looking at it. But if you are, and a lot of MBA students, sometimes professors, etc., and people from corporates to reach out to us for such specific collaborations, feel free to do that. You have our email IDs. Feel free to reach out to me and we'll look into it a little better. Having said that, I think we are over time. There were a couple more questions which I've said we can cover in this session on Saturday. But once again, thank you so much, Raji and Husain, for joining us today and sharing your insights. I think this webinar would be really helpful for any entrepreneur, especially any startup thinking about taking their products in the market, but a lot of other researchers, academicians, students as well in our community and our challenge of participants. So thank you with that. And I'll stop the recording. Any closing thoughts before I switch off the recording, Raji or Husain?
Thank you so much, Adil, for this opportunity. It was a pleasure like presenting all of this. And like we mentioned earlier, we're always available here. So if there are any other questions or like if there's anything else that is needed, they can always write to us. And thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. I think this is one of my first external facing sessions. So it was really good to speak to all of you. And again, because there have been so many launches in the past 6 months, we are definitely looking at, tracking some of the performance and, we will be providing some resources later this year related to that. So, it's an exciting time for the industry and best of luck for the rest of phase 3.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think people really love the session, as is evident from the chat box. So really glad that you could join us today. Thank you.